This episode is sponsored by Victory Grips. Victory Grips are the standard in hand protection, plus they just launched their new gym affiliate program. As affiliate owners, they understand the demands of gym owners. Their goal is to keep their gym referral program process as simple as possible. You'll receive educational content, early access to upcoming releases, and exclusive discounts for your members, plus received a percentage of the net sales. Find out more at victorygrips.com. Welcome to the Power Monkey Podcast, where we chat with the best in the world about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host, Mike Service, and on today's episode, we have Justin Cotler. Justin is the owner and founder of Underdog Athletics based in Las Vegas. He came from the East Coast prior, having owned an affiliate in Astoria, New York for many years before moving west with his family during the pandemic. Underdogs has become one of the premier training environments for elite athletes looking to compete at the CrossFit Games, with a stable of athletes including such names as Kari Pearce, Ricky Gerard, up-and-coming superstar Alex Kazan, and legend, just joining the stable, Sarah Sigmundsdottir. Justin is a no-nonsense kind of coach whose passion for coaching comes through when he speaks about his athletes. He has a refreshing honesty when it comes to tough subjects, and it was great to get his take on what might be missing from the CrossFit Games to allow it to reach new heights in terms of visibility and financial growth. We really enjoyed this episode, and we think we'll have Justin on in the future, and we hope you enjoyed this episode with Justin as well.
How you guys doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. Little tired, but that's, common with a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. So,
maybe we just start there. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old as well.
Oh, dude.
And,
so, yeah.
Life is a challenge at every moment. These guys are both sans children. So when they were like, okay, we're going to get on a little early and start chatting about some stuff, I was like, I got one kid that's pooping that I got to go, and the other one's hanging from the rings in the other room, and it's 5 in the morning over here. We haven't even started out the day.
Yeah.
And they're like, all right, well, I'm going to have my coffee and just sit here. And so,
yeah, it's a balancing act. And honestly, my wife's a superhero. So thank God for her.
You have girls or boys?
I have my 6-year-old. Well,
there he is.
Yeah, there's the little guy.
Hey,
the 3-year-old. I was about to say to you, yeah, just expect that kids will be running in, and this is just
a mohawk.
Yeah, he does. Yeah,
that's awesome,
Jackson. Yeah, so Jaxie's 3. Say
hey,
hi.
man, what's up?
Hi.
Hey,
What's
bud.
up?
Oh, he can't.
And our daughter is 6. Yeah, she's actually she's freaking, I don't know, she's pretty incredible. She just she was the youngest level 3 in the state of Nevada, won state champion on bars and vault this past season, and so she's she loves it. But yeah, she's incredible gymnast, rock climber, and ninja warrior. So, and just grew up in the gym. So that's so that's one of those things, how that is with the kids that grow up in the gym. They just think that stuff is normal.
We had an area where we want to start, but this is going to be part of the conversation. Why don't we just go on with this?
Yeah.
6-year-old, we saw that she had some impressive accolades this last year. That's awesome to see. Any gymnastics background between you and your wife?
No. You know what? I will say, sports background for me, I played college athletics. I played college basketball and college golf. So pretty wide extremes. But my wife was a musical theater major. My wife has incredible athletic ability. She grew up in a really small town and had to work from a really young age for the family business. So really didn't have a lot of time to devote to that. But I know she wishes she would have, because once she got into CrossFit, her ability to do body weight movements, isometric holds, things like that were uncanny. She has the longest L-sit of any human being I've ever seen. She has over when she was competing, she had over a 3-minute L-sit.
Wow.
Just remarkable. Yeah.
Wow.
Like flexed arm hang, L-sit, things like that were so easy for her. Yeah, it was annoying, to be honest.
That's something like Glassman used to talk about all the time too, right? Trying to get somebody a 3-minute L-sit hold. That's
remarkable.
That's no joke. I don't think I've ever seen that before.
I've never seen it. She's the only one that I've ever seen do that. So yeah, that's pretty.
And you said dance background?
Yeah, she was a singer dancer, musical theater, and I think it would have been interesting because she is pretty talented, athletically, and I played everything as a kid. I wish I would have, gotten into gymnastics, but I played, football, baseball, basketball, and I was in South Florida, so also played tennis and golf. And but yeah, was a huge sports nut as a child and obviously as an adult. But throughout my life, yeah, it's been a huge sports and music. Those have always been the two things. And if you know a little bit about my background, I was a full-time recording artist for 10 years. And so it was, those two things have played a huge part of my life. And yeah, it's nice to see some of those things kind of popping through with the kids. It makes things exciting.
Yeah, starting to get to, I don't know about relive, but get to see some of the things that maybe you aspired to or wish you could have done when you were a kid, and now being able to impart some of that on them. I
Yeah,
feel
it's
like we're
awesome.
running a little bit of some parallel lives here. Me having a 6 and a 3-year-old like yourself, and having both been in New York for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, we lived down the block from each other, and we didn't really know that, but we were in Astoria for a number
Yeah,
of
it's
years,
crazy.
and we're
I
right
know.
down the block. We passed by your gym quite often. We were unfortunately on the other side of the tracks going to CrossFit LIC all those years, but I feel like we've crossed paths many times, and now it's good to be able to actually chat and get to know each other a little bit more. I think we finally got a chance to chat at Wadapalooza for a
Yeah.
few minutes
Yeah. At
and
the
heard a little bit
RX
more of
Smart
that.
Gear booth. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
just incredible background with the music stuff. And the one of the things that caught my attention, you're talking about a lot of sports growing up and you being such a sports fan, and just getting into coaching. But on the sports side, what do you follow? What sports are you kind of really into, and are you still into it, or is kind of CrossFit Functional Fitness kind of taking that attention these days?
No, I'm a massive sports fan still. So I follow. What's funny is I was born and raised in Miami. So I'm a Miami guy. But I am an obsessive Miami Hurricanes fan. So
All right.
anything Miami Hurricanes, see Jordan over there is like, are we a Gator or a Seminole? One of the two.
Yeah, my brother went
Jordan's
to Florida
Jordan's
State, so I'm
yeah, there we
still
go.
a fan, yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Um, so massive Canes fan. Some of my most fond memories growing up, my entire family went to University of Miami. My dad, my mom, my grandfather, uncle, etc. So we had season tickets to the Canes back in the old Orange Bowl when the Canes were the Canes,
Yep. Yep.
growing up. And so I was at the 1983 Orange Bowl when they beat Nebraska, in the stands. I was at all the national championship games from the time that I was, a kid. So 83 to 91 when we won in 83,
Those Jimmy
85,
Johnson
87,
years.
91. See, yeah, it was Howard Schnellenberger, Jimmy Johnson,
Yeah.
Dennis Erickson years. And I just remember those being some of just the atmosphere and the love that the city had for the team. And it was just this amazing memories that I have, this nostalgic memories I have with my family going to the games and, some of my best friends that I went to the games with. And, now I'm a long suffering Canes fan. We haven't won a national championship since 2001. And we've been pretty shitty.
Yeah, but now
But
you got Cristobal over there,
yeah,
right? And you
yeah,
got the Oregon guy. I'm in Oregon now, and just seeing him leave the Ducks to go back home, that was tough to see the Ducks lose him. But he
yeah.
seems to have that same kind of draw for a lot of the recruits to bring some pride back to Hurricane.
Yeah, he's a great recruiter and we'll see. But yeah, so still a huge Canes fan. And I'm a Dolphins fan. I'm a Heat fan. So Miami guy through and through as far as Canes, as far as sports teams are concerned, but also just love sports. I mean, I'm big into Formula One. I'm big into
Yes.
big into Formula One, big into golf, big into tennis, always have been as a kid. Love to watch, my wife makes fun of me because she'll come downstairs and I'll be watching, something obscure on television. She'll be like, what the fuck are you watching? You got dodgeball on, like something.
Watching the Ocho, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, cornhole, so there's things that I love competition and whatever that might be. I've loved it since I was a kid. I've always been extremely competitive, probably to a fault. And so sports in general, man, I love it. And really and truly I would say, if I get a chance to watch television, that's what's going on TV. So, something, in the realm of the sports world. And now obviously, CrossFit plays a huge part of that. And, I'm a big like history CrossFit buff. So go back and watch a lot of stuff, especially like leading up to the games. I'm going back and watching a lot of events and, just trying to draw on whatever I can for my athletes and things like that. I think film studies, one of the lost arts in CrossFit. We don't do a ton of it as CrossFit coaches and CrossFit athletes, especially like the newer breed. I feel like, they can learn a lot from going back and watching, some of the OGs and some of the phenomenal, athletes and competitors we've seen in the sport. So I try to impart that as much as I can to my athletes to go back and watch and study. But yeah, man, I'm still a huge sports guy.
Love
Well,
it.
I don't want to derail the conversation. I just wanted the film study thing, because that popped up when we talked to both Alex and Kari. Both of them mentioned how much you'll go back and be watching film and then use that to come in to their training. And I don't know, Dave, if you've come across that, but in the 10 plus years that I've been around CrossFitters, I've never heard of that. Like nobody watching film, and coming from the same, like growing up playing every sport that there was, and like film was life. Like that's where you learn everything, whether it's watching your own film to make corrections and then watching others to pick up and learn from them. So that's something interesting that I'd love to hear a little more about.
Yeah, I think what's crazy, Mike, is it seems like something that would be so easy to do, and something that would be, kind of commonplace. But you don't hear about it much in our sport, and I not just film sessions, going back and watching competitions, but I mean, I try to, and it's crazy how hard it is to get my athletes to do this. And I don't think it's just mine. I think it's just in general, but I talk to them all the time about filming sessions, about, like, don't just film, one thing, like film your session and, film, because you don't know what you're going to learn, and I understand a lot of people don't want to be slaves to the phone. I get it. And a lot of people don't want to be slaves, but this is your job. And this is a way for you to gain knowledge, and knowledge as an athlete, data as an athlete. I mean, it's monstrous. You guys know that. As coaches, it's enormous for us to have, more data and more understanding of what we need to do to tweak this or tweak that to become, even 0.1% better at something, which could make the difference between one spot, and 4 points or whatever it is you want to call it, which is massive. So I think it's one of those things that, but I think a lot of it just has to do with, CrossFit is still kind of in the incipient stages, right? As a sport, we're talking about these other sports that have been around forever, and we just haven't quite got there yet, I think. But I'm happy to hear that they're saying that, because that maybe at least they hear me.
It stuck out. It stuck out big with them. And then that kind of, we were already just talking a little bit about seeing how you interact with your athletes. And then, somebody that you coach like Big Braun, that I think is pretty far away from you. Then you have someone like Alex that's there with you. And then I've experienced this in the past. The athletes that I'm with, I love it, and working with them, and when we do all of our events and get to work in person. But for me personally, I've found that the athletes that I work with remotely tend to progress better because they're forced to record things and learn from that. So they end up having a lot more of those like aha moments, like, oh, I never noticed I was doing this. Is that what's that like for you?
That's really interesting, actually. I think it's a good point, because obviously as a remote coach, it's imperative that we get to see what they're doing. So they're videoing and sending us videos, et cetera. And I think sometimes that some of the athletes in person take for granted that you're there and that your eyes are on them. And, but also, I mean, what you can watch in real time, which I think is incredibly important, right? The cues you can give in real time are incredibly important. But that's not to say that we're not going to miss something, or I have other athletes in the gym, or I've got to take a phone call, or I've got to do this, or I got to do that. And sometimes, I'll be like, hey, did you video this? And be like, oh no, I forgot, and it's one of those things where you're like, well, just video everything, just get used to, because you never know what it's going to be that day, and we talk about trying to, I mean, there's a lot of people that say, the 1% better every day, but it really is true. And ultimately film study is huge. And I talk about film study in Metcons, especially because what you think you're doing and what you're actually doing are so different, when it comes to movement quality, when it comes to rest periods, when it comes to, when it comes to everything. And what's funny is, when we go back and watch a Metcon, and an athlete will just be like, holy shit, I had no idea that that's the way I was moving, or that I thought in my head, I just rested 10 seconds where I just rested 17 seconds, etc. So you're able to really get into the fine, minutia of the details, which, listen, when we get to this level and we're talking about somebody like Alex, right? And Kari was a perfect example, because Kari, I think, got the most out of what Kari was capable of. I know Kari, listen, Kari is the original for me, the original underdog. I mean, I've been coaching and doing this forever, but Kari's family, and, it was one of those situations that it was just the perfect storm of time in my life, time in her life, and we came together and we were able to, do some amazing things. But I always talk about how Kari wasn't the most talented physically. She had physical limitations. Part of it had to do with her stature, just her size, but part of it had to do with her background, right? Like, she was incredible at what she was incredible at, but she had to develop so many other skills because she was so incredible at what she was incredible at. She was a specialist, and she turned from a specialist into a generalist, and one of the best that we've ever seen in the sport. And she was able to do that, through hard work and determination and her mindset and all these things. But she wasn't the most physically gifted, and when you look at the sport now and you see just some of the athletes and some of the, you see these, and one of them is Alex, to be honest. When we talk about the maturation process and her trajectory, there have been very few athletes in the history of the sport who are bulletproof athletes, right? Who don't have, quote unquote, weaknesses or big weaknesses. I really can only think of two. We talk with Rich Froning and Matt Frazier and Tia Claire Toomey, because even Rich back in the day, he made it interesting, right? He would have triple threes, he'd come in 28th, and he'd go into the last day not in the lead, and he have to pull, and he was human and people loved it. But when you talk about people who walked out on the floor and you were like, they're going to win every event, and that's Tia and Matt. And so your job as a coach, when you find somebody, and it's very rare to find somebody like an Alex, who you think can ultimately possibly progress to that point of becoming that bulletproof athlete, film study is one of the most important things, because it's not just film study for her, but it's also go back and look at the best in the sport, right? Someone who's the best at a specific movement. How fast do they cycle? How many reps can they do in a minute? How many reps are they doing in an AMRAP where they've got to do, a specific amount? How many are they doing in 15 to 20 seconds? And you're going back and you're studying this, and ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to tick that box. You're trying to say, okay, I can be competitive. I may not be better than that person, but I can be competitive with that person who's the best in the world. And now once I've done that, let's go to the next movement. Now, when I've done that, let's go to the next movement. Now that I've done that, let's go to the next movement. And that sounds laborious, but when you got someone who's 21 years old and they're already so good at so many things, but you can now highlight the 4 or 5 things that maybe they're not the best at. And now you can raise that to the level that all the other things, the levels of competency and virtuosity of the other movements. Well, now you've got an athlete who's so dangerous that it doesn't matter what the programming is. They walk out on the floor and they can win. And that's a dream as a coach, right? That's a dream when we, generally speaking, everyone's going to see a competition and there's going to be a workout that comes out where you're just like, oh, fuck, right? Like I was hoping that wasn't going to come up. Well, when you can get to the point where that doesn't matter, and there are so few athletes that are like that, and I think, to circle back, I think that that incorporating film study is one of the huge parts of that. In not just watching yourself, but also watching some of the best that have ever done it to really understand what it takes to get to that level. So sorry, I was a very roundabout way to get to that point.
You're speaking our love language. It's like the infinity rings of like perfection in CrossFit or something, because like Dave coming from the gymnastics world and me from the weightlifting world, like perception of your movement, your attention to detail, your ability to make all of those micro adjustments. That's, I think, something that we're used to working on with athletes all the time. And even then it can be difficult to buy in. But I personally haven't heard so much of that from, let's say, a holistic CrossFit coach, like somebody that's really working on everything, where you're teaching your athletes to find those small things that they can take ownership of. And again, like you said, that with like programming is programming. And my coach in weightlifting was always, he's like, you can do any program that you want. He's like, it's how you move within your program, how aware you are of yourself, how much you believe in the program. And it sounds to me like you've offered a lot of ownership to your athletes, to kind of take hold of their transition times, how they're cycling through, how they're moving within, skills and disciplines. And we could geek out on this conversation, I think, for a while.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think part of that for me too, and I think it's really important that you brought it up, is the program's program. There's plenty of great programmers, honestly. But does the athlete buy in? And then, like you said, aside from that, and aside from the consistency portion, those types of things, you got to show up, right? But yeah, I think a lot of it is in the really small details, right? And it's not just, are they doing the program? It's how are they doing the program, right? And so ultimately, like we're really trying to improve on that. And then I think also as a CrossFit coach, because I look at myself as a really strong generalist, but take someone like Dave, someone like you guys are also specialists. You guys are so good, and there are things that you can probably look at that I might be able to see it, but I won't necessarily see it in the detail that you do in your specialties. So I think it's important for a CrossFit coach, especially someone like myself, to almost be the project manager, where it's like, listen, if we want to get you to this certain level, like we need to have someone at Dave's level, at Mike's level, to come and watch you do this, or watch you do this, or watch you do this, or work with you for 2 months or 3 months. Now, I believe you can get to a certain level, right, where you can kind of get away with maybe not doing that for a little while, because you've got to get in the gym, and you want to have good movement patterns. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is, like, for someone like Alex now, she's at the point where, like, we've gotten to the point where we've gotten her good enough that she can compete with the best in the world. But now, how do we compete with the best in the world? Now, how do we beat the best in the world? And that is to improve her virtuosity in all these different realms. And so now it's a matter of bringing in the specialists, of really honing in on, this specific thing. And over the next 2 to 3 years, because she's so young and because she's so talented, we're going to have the ability to really, like we were talking about before, build that bulletproof athlete. And the way to do that, especially from my perspective, is to, I think that there are some coaches that might take that as an ego hit, bringing someone else in, or sending them to Power Monkey, or like, they get afraid. They're like, oh, well, I can't, I need to be able to control the situation. And I've always been like, especially at this time in my life, like, I know I don't know everything. Like, that's the bottom line. And I know that, that there are people who are much smarter than I am. And if we can locate those people and they can help you, then fuck, that's my job. Like as the head coach, you look at a head coach of a football team, a basketball team, there's a reason there's offensive coordinators. There's a reason there's defensive coordinators. There's a reason that you've got an offensive line coach. These are people who've devoted their entire lives to specific things. And if you don't listen to those people, then you're an asshole. So ultimately, I'm just, I think it all ties to itself when we're talking about, trying to, in a way create greatness. And so, yeah, it's fun, man. I love it. I love geeking out on this stuff because to me, it's, there's so many little things that we can do as coaches to try to level up our athletes. And, I think part of it has to do with letting your ego go too. I think that's a big part.
I think a good conversation piece here that Mike brought up is this idea of athlete ownership, right? And, you can kind of lead the athlete, and some of it is them taking on the responsibility of watching film or going home and getting enough rest and doing all the ancillary things outside of the gym that are as important. And it's not just buying into the program, right? But it's also buying into you as the leader of that program and to the coach. And from the athletes from Underdog that we've spoken to, the Karis and the Alexes that we've had at the camp, they just speak so highly of you as a coach and as a mentor and as someone that they appreciate leading them and believing in you and the programming, but most importantly, you as a person. And I'm curious about you turning into a coach, coming from being a collegiate athlete and, just loving sports as much as you did, as you mentioned. Do you emulate any of your coaching kind of characteristics after anyone in the coaching world? Do you say, I see myself as, this person that I saw growing up, or, a team that I loved? Any coaching characteristics you emulate from some coaches that you've been around or that from the sports world?
Yeah. So I think I was very lucky growing up, to have some great coaches when I was younger. But I think my style or like you said, where do you pull from? I think it's a melding of several different people. I had this incredible, I was very, very lucky as a young athlete at 16 years old. I was chosen as a group of like some really, really good athletes, to work with a guy. At the time, he was the strength and conditioning coach for the Miami Heat. His name was Bill Ferran. He's a legendary strength and conditioning coach in the NBA, Hall of Famer. And it was the first time that I, had any understanding of strength training, proper nutrition, all that stuff. And I mean, we're talking, guys, I'm old, so I'm 48 years old. So, in the 90s, early 90s, there wasn't a lot, especially in high school, right? Where you go lift some weights, go bench press. I mean, that was basically it, and it was first time I'd ever done any Olympic weightlifting. It was first time that I'd ever, been on any type of structure or periodized program or anything like that. So understanding that and learning about that as a young athlete, I think was incredibly important. I played college sports, at the University of Pennsylvania and was able to, again, kind of glean a lot, from the other athletes around me and coaches around me there. Had a phenomenal, few basketball coaches, honestly, a couple guys, Fran Dunphy, who was a legend in Philadelphia, went on he coached Penn and then Temple and and a few other, of the assistant coaches that we had that were just incredible coaches. And I think a lot of my coaching style, came from the people I was around, but also the great teams and coaches that I read about as a child. I was a big Wooden fan back in the day. I was a big Phil Jackson guy, even though I, rooted against him because I was a Heat fan. But I mean, watching Phil Jackson. And then I think my ability, then after college, when I was a recording artist for a while and being on stage and things like that, just developing the ability to be able to affect people when you're in front of them and being on stage, I think had also was very important in my ability to speak to people and my comfort level, as far as, being in front of a crowd or being, not really, in front of a camera, things like that, which I think were important. So I think a lot of it is just the experiences that you have growing up. I wouldn't say there was one specific. I would say it was like I said, a melding of several different personalities. And then I think a lot of it just comes with experience. I coached my first CrossFit Games athlete back in 2010. So it's this will be my 14th games. And I was lucky enough to coach in the grid league and win a few championships with the DC Brawler. So it wasn't just coaching individuals, it was also putting teams together, that could have a championship mindset. So I feel like I've been very lucky to work with some amazing athletes and be put in positions, to feel comfortable there. And I also, have to be honest. I mean, it hasn't worked with everyone. I've coached a lot of really good athletes that I don't coach anymore, and I'm grateful that I got to coach them, but, whether my style didn't work for them or whether, there were some things there that didn't work. And I think as a coach, you need to take ownership of that. You need to assess the things you do well, maybe the things that you didn't do well, and the things you need to do better. And I think, I think now I have a really good understanding of the type of athlete that I work well with. And I think sometimes you'll get an athlete that maybe, in your heart it might not work out, but fuck it, you're going to try the hardest you can to make it work. And sometimes it doesn't. I've experienced that in the last few years, which is tough, but at the end of the day, I think all of it, forms us and shapes us as coaches. So I'm still learning, but yeah, I feel I feel lucky and blessed to have been able to coach, athletes like Alex and Kari, obviously, and, Ricky and now Sarah, Sigmund's daughter and those type of athletes. And it's cool, man. It's fun. It's a fun gig.
So what do you say is the distinguishing characteristic of someone that works well under your tutelage as a coach? You say there might be an athlete that works really well for your coaching style. What is something that resonates as an athlete that might fit in well?
Well, I think you have to. I'm very emotional. I think some coaches look at it as a business
in the gym as well, not just in competitive situations, but also daily in the gym. Same way.
Yeah. Okay. I'm an emotional coach, and I think it works for some, and I think for others it's too much. And I think so. So I think if somebody thrives on emotion and passion, I think that's a really good mix. I also think I'm a little bit old school in the fact that I can be tough. It's not always a kumbaya moment. Like there's not, I feel like I come from the generation where if I wasn't doing something well, my coach was going to tell me that. Mm-hmm. And I was able to take that constructive criticism in a sense. And I hate to use the word criticism, but it was I was able to take a coaching cue. It might have been constructive. And when I say constructive, aggressive. Yeah. Right. And I think that I can be that way. And I think sometimes, and you can't treat everyone the same, you have to understand everyone has different personalities, and what you say to one person to build them up actually might break someone else down. Right. So I think I can do that well. And I think that I understand that well enough, but I definitely think, I'm not afraid to speak my mind to somebody, and I'm going to tell you when you're doing well, and I'm going to give you a lot of love. But if you're not, I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass and say this is going really well when it's not. There's times I think that athletes do need a kick in the butt, and you could make that positive, but I think it's important to be able to say that. So I think that just comes back again to the emotion of things, and I think it's just because I care. Mm-hmm. I care a lot. And I'll never apologize for that. But yeah, I think in general, and I'm fine with the coaches that look at things more analytically as far as this is a business relationship and I'm here to do a job and, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's great, but that's not me. I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and I think my athletes know that. And I think that's why we have, over the last few years with Underdogs now, I think we've created a culture that athletes understand. So we're now, I think, kind of getting to the point where you're seeing less and less volatility in our camp, because now it's like the culture has been set. People understand what we are and who we are and who I am, and from the top down. And I think now it's a really good culture, a great environment, whether you're in-house or around the world. I think we just have established, that culture. And I think that's important, to understand that, because it works for some and it doesn't work for others. And that's okay. And that's why there's different camps, and that's why there's different coaches. But I'm very comfortable with, kind of who I am at this point as a coach. And, like I said, I think it works well for some athletes, and the others that maybe it doesn't work well for, that's okay. And that's, they'll find someone else that it does. And that's great.
Absolutely.
It's Dave, I just wanted to chime in a little bit, just that you're filling in some I guess voids for me, since I haven't interacted with you so much, and when you're explaining your style, and then I'm connecting that with the athletes of yours that I have met, and I feel like the athletes that seem to really gravitate towards you and succeed, and some of the new ones that have started to work with you are definitely thoughtful, like pretty even keel athletes that seem to really enjoy learning. So, Alex, as the prime example, when she came to camp with us, it was like she came anticipating like a master class. She's like, there's all these specialist coaches here, and I'm going to ask every one of them every question that I've ever had and see what they tell me. And I'm going to try and then take that back with me. And that was really cool to see, from talking with Kari and knowing her background as a high level gymnast, that, I mean, you can't do that without being relatively analytical and thoughtful and even virtuous. And that would be a word that you used, that it seems like those are the athletes that gravitate towards you. They want to be virtuous athletes. I think they see themselves as somebody who's going to be very good, but also very willing to put in that extra work.
And that makes me, honestly makes me proud, like to hear Alex, because we talked about that prior to her going down there, which was essentially like, I think her concern at the time was like, well, a month before semis, is it gonna get me out of my rhythm? And my thought process was like, you're 21 years old. You have the opportunity to be around geniuses in their sport. It's like, what are you talking about? Of course you're gonna go, like it didn't make any sense. And I wanted to come. It's just, Dave knows we're talking about with the kids and wife, and, you got to pick and choose when you can go do things, and ultimately, I think, she came back and you could see it, it was wonderful to have her be able to spend time with you guys and with Chris. And, I mean, it's been amazing, honestly, and she did the VO2 max testing, and Chris got on the phone with me and was like, holy shit, like, you've got a monster here. And Chris has been helping us out, now leading into the games, and doing some endurance programming with her, and is really stoked to kind of follow up and work with her after the games. And I was like, hell yeah, like, let's do this thing, but yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with, like you talked about, there was a really important word you used there, which was open-minded. I have dealt and coached athletes in the past that weren't open-minded. And my thing was like, well, what do you need a coach for then? It's just like, if you don't want to listen, or you want to, that's fine. Like, Rich never had a coach, really. I mean, he was, and he kind of came in and wrote down stuff on a board and did what he wanted to do, and that was fine. But my thing is, like, if you're not going to listen, or I'm going to say something and there's always going to be combative, I'm not interested in that, so I think the open-minded part is huge. So yeah, I think that's awesome. I love hearing that, because I intend to send more. So it's it's good.
Anytime
I hope they
you
all
want.
come down there. Yeah.
We got to get you out as well at some point.
Yeah.
You'd love it.
Yeah.
You mentioned Sarah in there as a new Underdog athlete, and obviously Sarah is a legend in the sport and has done so much individually up to this point. But there's always this what if moment with Sarah. Like, what if the cards aligned correctly and she, fully established herself as the talent that we all know that she has. From your perspective, working with her over this short period of time, what's the one missing piece for her to be able to get back to the podium or potentially the top of the podium, if you think that's a realistic goal?
Well, I think over the last few years, it's been health. I mean, my goodness, she hasn't really, and honestly, I think it's a phenomenal trait of hers, is that she refuses to use that as an excuse. But I've gotten to know kind of the ins and outs, and it's not my story to tell. To be honest, it's not my story to divulge all the stuff that she's had to deal with over the last few years since the knee injury, and even before the knee injury. But I think that what you've seen, since the knee injury, is ultimately a result of just not being healthy. And I think prior to that, she was one of the most successful athletes that we had seen in the sport, and it didn't always correlate to games results, but it did correlate to winning Dubai, winning strength and depth, right? Always finishing top 3 at Wadapalooza. I mean, just this incredible record of what we would call, or what I would call, major events, right? Mm-hmm. And then 2 podium finishes at the games. I think with Sarah, in some cases in the past, she wasn't always in the best situation, with coaches, and I'm talking about, I think a little bit younger, and I don't know that she was always getting the best advice. I don't know that there wasn't enough premium on the rest and recovery. And I think that had a lot to do with some of the performances that we saw at the games and her breaking down and whatnot. But to be honest with you, man, like what excites me, and I've never really been around somebody like Sarah. When you talk about the energy and the light that she possesses, just being for the semifinal, European semifinal, was the first time that I was able to coach her in person, and we've been friends for a long time. But the energy that she walks around with, and the, just this vibe that she has, to her, to her team, the spectators, the staff, that she just builds everyone up. She lifts everyone up at no matter what's going on the competition floor. And I really, it's a rare quality to have, and my thing is like, I want to try to bring back the joy for her on the competition floor. That's the key for me, is to try to get her to a position, whether or not, that means making the games, finishing the top 10, whatever that might be, like, so that she can go out there and inspire people the way that she always has, and be this icon and ambassador of the sport, one of the best that we've ever seen, because I think she's more important than just how she finishes at the games. Mm-hmm. I think she's one of those athletes, one of the few that we have in the sport that crosses over and that transcends the sport. So, I think at this point in her career, she's really looking for someone who believes in her and who understands that, sometimes, part of her life and what she does is she Sarah, where are you today? Oh, I'm in Dubai. Well, Sarah, where are you today? Oh, I'm in Iceland. Sarah, where are you today? I'm in San Francisco. Like, that's Sarah, and that's okay. And I'm okay with that, because she works her ass off, and because I know that she's going to try to maximize what she can do. And it's key for me now to one, try to make sure that she understands that, her health is, if we can't get her back to that, point where she can actually trust her body, and she's not going to be able to perform the way that she wants to. And that's one of the things that we're working on now, being more patient, because in the past she hasn't been. I mean, I've heard some of the things where, she'd be at a semifinal and she would do the semifinal, and then she'd have 2 or 3 more sessions that day, There are things that it's just wild to hear some of the things that she was doing in the
Wow.
past. And so we're trying to curb some of those things. But yeah, I think a healthy Sarah and a happy Sarah is one that can be successful. And that's the key to me right now. So she's here. She's about to come out to Las Vegas. She's gonna help Alex prep for the next few weeks, and I think impart as much knowledge as she can. And then I think she's going to go and train with another athlete that I coach, Caitlin Van Ziel in Australia. Caitlin's a phenomenal athlete and just a phenomenal person. And Sarah and she are best friends. And I think Sarah's going to go there, and the two of them are going to train for a while in the off season, which I think will be a really great environment for the both of them, because just have this amazing energy. But yeah, that is the key to me is just trying to get her body where it needs to be so that she can compete with joy, because I think when she does, she's one of the best in the world. And I still think she can be. She's only 30 years old. So that's one of the keys for me to try to accomplish with her.
Yeah, we're all big fans of Sarah and want to see her do well, not only just as a person, but for the sport too. Having someone of her caliber and her personality is just a great thing for the exposure of the sport. And along those same lines, in terms of exposure, I've heard you talk about just wanting to see the sport grow, obviously, as someone who's so involved in it and so invested. But hearing you talk about the possibility of seeing the sport of functional fitness and CrossFit grow to being able to give athletes and coaches real long-time careers in terms of financial incentives as well. And it kind of goes in line with you being, having been a grid coach, and in your bio, you tell me if this is still true, but you being the head coach for USA for the Functional Fitness League and things like that, where these different entities that are trying to help grow the sport of just giving opportunities. Do you envision that a decade from now, there will be the possibility for these athletes to, one, potentially compete in the Olympic Games and functional fitness being in the Olympics, or potentially being able to make Major League Baseball, NFL type contracts for these athletes to have some real incentive to say that I am devoted as an athlete, rather than trying to have 6 side jobs and still trying to make it a career?
God, I hope so, Dave. I don't know, man. I think there are times when you see things that happen that you're very optimistic. And then there are other times when you see things that happen and you're like, well, fuck, and, I'm hopeful. And like you talk about, man, I think a lot of this for me is about creating athlete opportunities, but I think that there are some things that have to happen. And I think part of that is, has to be pushed and has to come from the athletes.
From the athletes, not from CrossFit entity.
Absolutely.
From the
100%. I think the power is in the athletes. The athletes can, if there are certain things that the athletes want, and I've been lucky enough to be a part of some of these conversations behind the scenes with the PFAA and some of the other, high profile coaches and managers. And a lot of things that are talked about behind the scenes that, just aren't really put out there in the public. And I think they need to be. I think there's a lot of people who are, who see things and the way things are done and that are unhappy about it, or understand that it needs to change for us to move forward. And I think a lot of people are afraid, or the top 5 or 10 people are comfortable. Right. They're comfortable. They're making money enough. They're doing well enough with sponsorship. Right. And for a normal human being, they're doing well. But when you talk about compared to other athletes in other sports, it's a pittance of what we're seeing in other sports. Right. It's just not comparable. And I think that ultimately we have to get to the point where the athletes drive more power and can make demands that elevate, the sport when it comes to, judging, programming, et cetera. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I felt like, going to semifinals this year, in the United States. Now, I felt like the European semifinal was the most professional one that I had been to, and I've heard the same about Torian. But I mean, I felt like the North American semifinals this year were like I was going to a regional in 2013, 2014. That's what it felt like to me. It didn't feel like a professional sporting event.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like a local backyard throwdown, to be honest with you. I mean, and I I don't know what the answer is, but I think the answer is that we need to keep questioning, and we need to keep talking about it and not be afraid to to hold some of the members of HQ to task about programming, about safety, about purses, about sponsorship, about just professionalism in general. And but I think it's going to take people who are more powerful than I am to do it, and I mean, I certainly am willing to be a cog in the wheel. I will say, I mean, I've never really been afraid to voice my opinion, and sometimes it's got me in trouble, and I'm okay with that, because I think, to force change or to create change, sometimes you got to say something that's unpopular. So I think that that's important. And, but I don't think we're anywhere near where we need to be. And I think it's imperative that the minds, the great minds, or like I said, I think it's everyone collectively. I think it's you get the coaches, you get the athletes, you get the managers, you get the people who can affect things in a room a few times a year to say, okay, what are we doing? How do we move this forward? Are we happy with this? Are we unhappy with this? Because ultimately, you can't tell me that, that you go to a semifinal and you look at the prize purse of semifinals. I mean, it's a joke. Half the majority of those athletes lost thousands of dollars that weekend, and it's unacceptable. I mean, it really is. I mean, at the end of the day, I understand that CrossFit is using it as a vehicle to be able to promote the sport of CrossFit, to be able to drive more affiliates, to be able to get more people to do the sport. I understand that, and that's fine. But we've also got to take care of our athletes, and we've got to enable our athletes to be athletes. And I feel like we've been in a standstill for a very long time. And I'm not sure exactly what it is. But I think like we talked about, I think it being vocal and questioning things is just the start of it. And so I'm hoping that we have a meeting that's happening the day after the games. That Brent Fikowski put together, PFA, and has invited essentially all the athletes competing, all the coaches, all the managers, etc., to meet and talk about, not just how the games went, but also how do we make things better, and how do we start driving this thing forward. And I think that that's important. But I don't know necessarily that it works unless pressure is put on. Right. Mm-hmm. And by pressure, I mean like demands. There are some things that I think ultimately will have to be like, hey, this needs to happen, this needs to happen, and this needs to happen, or we ain't showing up. Mm-hmm. And then at that point in time, I know people will not be happy about that. I know that but that's the way shit gets done sometimes, especially in sports. And you look at the major sports, that's happened all throughout major sports. And so, we'll see. But I mean, I'm hopeful, and I'm hopeful that I'm still around to see it. I don't know what the timeline will be, but I'll keep working my butt off to do my part to try to help it move forward for sure.
I got one more question, Mike, and you can jump in just to finish off that conversation, because CrossFit is kind of unique in the sense that they have a major league sport in conjunction with this grassroots entity of the affiliate system that they're trying to balance, right? And you being a head coach and running, a major league team, essentially, along with having been an affiliate owner, you're going to hear most affiliate owners be like, I don't give a shit about what happens at the games. I need to get more members in my gym.
Yep.
And there's this balance between the two. So you having been an affiliate owner and being on both sides of it, do you see there being synergy, realistic synergy between the two, with what happens at the games gets more members in my gym? Or should CrossFit realistically be saying, if we can get the affiliates to kind of be, humming along and get that 12K 1,000 member, affiliates around the world up to 50,000 in the next 10 years, that's going to feed more athletes at the other end? Or do they work synergistically? What do you think? It's top down, bottom up. What's the best approach there from your perspective?
That's such a good question, man. I wish I had the answer. I really do. I am fearful of the model the way it is now. It's more on the sports side than anything. Because my fear is that CrossFit is simply looking at the sport as the vehicle to be able to drive affiliates and members to affiliates. And that as long as that's happening, that things in the sport don't need to change. Do you understand
Right.
what I mean by that? And I have for a while thought that there needed to, and I know I don't know that this is a popular opinion, but I felt for a while that there might need to be some separation between the two for the sport to be able to grow. For CrossFit to focus on the methodology and to focus on now the methodology will always be the best methodology for athletes to be successful in the CrossFit Games, right? But is it the best model to grow the sport? I don't know that I believe that. And there may have to be some major shakeups for the sport to get where it needs to go. And that might mean, honestly, ultimately changing the model of our business too, because the way that I look at it is, it's a very interesting sport in the sense that, we're at Underdogs Athletics, we obviously coach elite athletes, but we also provide programming for the everyday CrossFit, or, whether it's our elite template, our masters template, our RX template, our everyday underdogs, et cetera. My goal would eventually get to the point where maybe we still do some of that, but what I would love is to be able to focus on having our elite coaches coach elite athletes and make a living doing that, the way that tennis coaches or golf coaches, right, or specific professional organizations in the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball do. And I've talked a lot about the idea of a Drive to Survive, like Formula One type show that highlights the camps, or that highlight, that now creates, we're talking about entertainment too. It's a sport, but sports in general, right? They entertain. And I think that there's a lot of stories and drama behind these athletes. And they're modern day superheroes. The things that they're doing is absolutely incredible. And I think we're missing that. I really do. And I think that's the issue that why we're not crossing over and why we are considered niche. And I think a lot of those things need to be looked at. And I think ultimately some really tough decisions will need to be made, because like you were talking about before, I'm not sure that the model the way it is now is the best for the sport at all.
I think it's just the conversation. And like you said, so Fikowski is going to have people come and talk. And I think that's part of being a young sport, is the conversations are still evolving and developing. But just while you're talking about that, I'm thinking of gymnastics historically, weightlifting historically, like Olympic sports that are not really known for spectator moments or stories until the Olympics are generally sports where athletes and coaches do not make any money.
Right.
And then when, you're talking about baseball, basketball, tennis, golf, these are sports that have learned how to do something that offers a bigger entertainment value all year round. And I think that is something that's unique about CrossFit, even within the current model, is people in the community are so invested in the elite athletes. Like, they want to know what they're doing all the time. But yeah, I guess the blind spots or unwillingness or just lack of conversation hasn't gotten the ideas creative enough to figure out how to make that work. So even like you said recently, when somebody was asking you about working with Big Braun, and he came to you because he was doing his own thing and he was kind of stuck. CrossFit's always been doing its own thing and it's sort of stuck. And eventually you have to kind of look at other models that are working, or be brave enough, as a group, maybe it is all of the athletes and coaches, and, looking at a model like the NFL or the NBA that has a players association. It's like, from that, okay, now you have an association, but now what do you want? Like, you also have to show, how does this, make something survive? So I think, which you probably, I think that's what you're saying, and probably coming to the conclusion is, there is no like answer yet. But if you don't start asking the questions, you have no answer. So like, just starting to ask these questions and be creative with ideas. I mean, IF3 is a great thought process, and like they're trying, like Gretchen's trying to do something to make the sport legitimate. And then it's all of these things are, for me, Dave will tell you, I'm an eternal optimist. So I think there's always, always a way to find a way. Of course, maybe we don't see that way in our lifetime or our experience with it, but we're also, usually you see progress 2 to 3 generations later. So like, we're not even into the second generation of CrossFit yet. Like the first generation of CrossFitters are still CrossFitting.
Yeah. It's nuts. Still got Annie Thor's daughter out there. Yeah. It's awesome. Yeah. Good points, man. Definitely.
I think that's a great point about potentially separating the two. I don't know how realistic that is, but it probably would allow for resources to be allocated a little bit more appropriately, rather than this kind of merging of what are we actually doing here? Who is our target audience is kind of a question I think we're constantly trying to figure out. But I'm optimistic as well. I'd love to see, Gretchen break through and potentially see IF3 get recognized as potentially an Olympic sport. We love Gretchen and we love what she's doing. And, if you're the USA Olympic head coach, I think there'd be another little notch on your belt, your coaching belt sometime down the line.
That would be exciting. Very exciting. Yeah. It's awesome.
Well, quickly, last little question. I know we got to get you going here, but programming for the games, it's coming up just a few weeks. Anything you're anticipating after seeing Boz's first year last year? Is there an emphasis that you guys have been putting in any particular area? New skill development, or again, an emphasis maybe on gymnastics again, or what are you envisioning as being an area that Boz is possibly going to be emphasizing?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think right now, actually, with Dave coming back, it's thrown a little bit of a monkey wrench, because I think we kind of saw the trends of what Boz was doing, but now do we know whether or not Boz really has final say?
Right.
Especially when Dave comes in and talks about, well, actually the cuts were going to be different, but I changed them. So now they're so we're not really sure. But I think in general, I think what Boz did was just kind of stretch, and so now you had to look at things a little bit differently, and that's cool. I think it's brought in some really interesting things that, that maybe we weren't thinking about before. So obviously we're prepping for those things and trying to think outside the box. I love games training. It's exciting. And especially when athletes buy in and they're excited to do it. And, which luckily, we have those athletes right now that are obviously, it's hard, but they're excited, they're excited to train that way. So yeah, I mean, we talked about, you saw the muscle up complex with a ruck. I mean, maybe we're going to see that with legless rope climbs now, or maybe we're going to see that with the pegboard, are we going to see triple unders, like all these different things that you've got to prep yourself for. But at the end of the day, right, it's still, I think, going to come down to ultimately engines win championships and how fit you are at the games, and as far as being able to, run well and hurt better than someone else and embrace that. And so, we're kind of making sure that that we're going in as fit as possible, and as healthy as possible. Those are two things. You want to feel like your fitness is where it needs to be, and you want to feel like your body can execute the way you want it to execute. So those are the two big keys, for us as far as prepping our athletes. And it's going well, man. I can't wait.
Guys, I have peaking at the right time.
I have a complex in my mind, and Oh, I love when we're on Zoom and you raise your hand and then the hand raises up.
It's awesome.
So this is just, it was in my mind, and from two professionals here. How do you guys feel about a handstand complex that would be a wall walk into a wall facing handstand push up into a handstand walk, pirouette back to a back to wall handstand push up, and it would be like an ascending ladder with rest intervals?
Wow.
Mike, I program that for my games athletes pretty regularly.
I've never seen it, so
awesome.
I've been with you for long enough that your ideas are starting to like
I'd love to
fester
see
into my
that.
brain.
That's super cool.
That's one of the complexes I give people pretty regularly. Something
That's
like
awesome.
that. A wall walk into a pirouette, into a back to the wall, different variation handstand push-ups all in one complex, so that they're understanding all the variations in different fatiguing moments, so that they can.
I'm stealing that, by the way, Dave. And Mike.
And you miss some of when Dave and I get together, and we'll talk about how to play a little bit more with our disciplines and skills. And I'm still wanting to see a snatch or a clean and jerk ladder, but that has to show control. So like you have to snatch 225, but you have to hold it in the bottom until your judge tells you you've shown like 3 seconds of like a good bottom position. And then you're able to stand, drop, run to your next weight. Like, things like this that are similar to showing proficiency in a handstand hold, where, we've started to put some things where, you have to actually demonstrate that it's not just like you rolled the craps and like got lucky on that one, but really, really show your level of skill. And the word you used, which I love, is virtuosity.
Yeah. Cool. Love it. Yeah, I'm steal that handstand complex. That's cool. I like it.
As soon as Boz and Dave start asking our opinions on workouts,
we've got it all figured out.
Love it.
Justin, thanks so much for the time today, man. I appreciate it. Your insight, your athletes, giving them the ability to come and work with us too. It was amazing to have Alex and Allison both out with us a couple of months ago, and hopefully we can get you, like we said, out at some point in the future. We think you'd love the experience. We are coming up on our 10-year anniversary in the fall. And, hopefully at some point in the future, you can pull away from the kids for a long enough time to be able to come hang with us. But before we get you out, we got a couple quick questions, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
All right. First one, what sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics?
Oh, man. I don't want to hurt someone's feelings.
We're used to it.
You'll never hurt Dave's feelings when you go with your heart.
I'm going to go with weightlifting.
I see Mike so excited. Hasn't happened in a while, so we'll give him that.
I mean, come on. He had like two of the most beautiful snatches at the Berlin semifinals with Sarah, with her new PR, and then Braun showing his stoic nature of hit something that's like 92% and then just be like, I'm good. I'm going to save it for the run now. Like,
yeah, we had to save it for the run. Trust me.
All right. Question number 2. Anyone you think would be great for us to have on the podcast? Someone you've come across recently that would be a good interview.
Oh, man. Wow. I mean, I was going to say Sarah, but she's so tough to get on.
We had her on
We've had Sarah on
really
on. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
she's just such a great.
We should get Sarah back on again too. So now she's got some new life changes. Maybe we can get her back on again.
Have you had Kiefer on, my assistant head coach? He's amazing.
Kiefer,
Kiefer's our guy.
He came to camp with us, was part of our strength conditioning team early on when he was in the Boston neighborhood with the champion guys, the Popes and the Tillys of the world. So
yeah, Kiefer would be a great guy to have on.
Yeah, maybe we can get Kiefer on, and well, I don't think we've had him on the podcast, so
cool.
It'd be good to chat with him. That would be a good one. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's great.
All right, last little question here. If you're a book reader, any books that you would recommend? If not, is there a TV show or movie you've come across that you'd recommend listeners checking out?
Well, I mean, I'm an English major from college, so I'm definitely a book reader. My favorite book of all time is a book called Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. So if you know that book, it's a great one. As far as TV shows, I can't necessarily recommend. But
Drive Survive. I mean, that's it.
Well, Drive Survive is amazing, but I have heard, and this is one that I want to go see, and it's not necessarily not necessarily a pick me up, but one that I think is really important. It's a movie I've heard about called Sounds of Freedom, which is going to be near and dear to me because I do a lot of work with OUR, Operation Underground Railroad, which is an organization, nonprofit out of Utah, that fights sex slavery with children and sex trafficking. And the movie is about that apparently. And it's supposed to be just mind blowing and, starting to unveil the real problem we have here in the United States with that. And as a father of two young children, it's terrifying. And so, that's something I've been hearing about. That's great. And is something that's a must see, that I'm going to go check out. So, that's something that it's been on my mind. So that's just something that's been on my mind.
Justin, seems like you got enough for another 5-6 podcasts. You got so many lives and so many interests that really get you on, and we do part 2 pretty easily.
Sounds great.
Well, thank you for the time, the suggestions. Can't wait to see what the team does out in Madison in a couple of weeks. We're going to be there cheering for you guys. So hopefully we can see you in person out there. Mike, anything you want to follow up with?
No, man. Thank you so much for coming on. It was really, I think we enjoy talking to everybody, but there's some conversations that just have a little more depth, and this felt like one of them. So thanks a lot.
I appreciate you guys, man. This has been a blast. Thank you.
Justin, where can people follow along and see what's going on with Underdog?
Yeah, go to at Underdogs Athletics on IG and underdogsathletics.com. And those are the 2 best places to check us out for sure.
Excellent. Well, all the listeners out there, please be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com for services and upcoming events. Please check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Mike Service. On behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your hosts. I'm Dave Durante with my co-host Mike Service. And until next time, thank you all for listening.